we need to start the campaign because he just got waived, as you may have seen, by the San Antonio Spurs. I know we spoke about him on the main channel on the video earlier today, but the Raptors can afford a minimum contract. If you can get him on a minimum contract, this would be a really, really nice pickup to bring in as a backup point guard. Now, unfortunately, Woj just said he has a chance to join a contending team to give him a bigger role. Okay, we're not a contending team. We may elect to go somewhere else. But, is there a possibility of making this deal happen? The whole thing becomes a bit more complicated when you look at the Raptors and the contract situation with the roster. The Raptors have, quote-unquote, finalized their roster for training camp. You're allowed 21 spots on your training camp roster. The Raptors have allocated all 21 spots to players as of right now. Of those 21 players, 18 can make the final roster, 3 of which being your two-way players, 15 of the other ones being on NBA contracts. The bigger problem for the Raptors, if they do want to get Cam Payne, is the fact that 15 players are already on guaranteed contracts for the upcoming season. Therefore, they would have to waive somebody and pay them not to play for their team to sign Cam Payne on the minimum, but they can sign a player on the minimum and they can stay under the luxury tax. So, in my opinion, if you want to win games this season, I'm very happy to waive a player to make room for Cam Payne. So let's talk about the players that should be in the discussion to be waived to make room for Cam Payne. I put up a little bit of a tier list here. I do this every year where I go through players and how likely I think it is that they are going to be on the roster for the upcoming season after the training camp. So there's the stone cold locks, self-explanatory. Yeah, they can kick their feet up. They know that they are on this team. The extremely safe, yeah, they gotta do their job and play, but they're not really thinking about getting cut. There's the middle tier checking their shoulder where, yeah, they should be safe, but they're also kind of like, oh, these guys are pretty good. I got to play well here. There's the on the edge where they are fearful of being waived. They are fearful of being cut. They have to show out or they are not going to make the roster. And there is the waive category, the players I expect to not make the roster. And we'll talk about potentially the 3 players that need to be waived from the 21 and potentially the 4 that could be waived if they want to make room for Cameron Payne. The campaign begins. So we're going to go in order based on just how it is kind of over here. We'll actually start with these 2 down here because these are easy. Mohamedou Gueye and Kevin Obanor are on Exhibit 10 deals. Exhibit 10 deals, if you don't know, can't quite explain it fully, but they are contracts that incentivize you staying with the G League team affiliate of the organization that signed you to it. So the Raptors signed these players to an Exhibit 10 deal. They get a bonus contract if they stay on the team for a certain period of time and stay with the G League team specifically for a certain period of time. They get a big bonus relative to an average G League contract. So it's a big financial incentive for that player to choose to play for your G League team and to lock up that player for your G League team when the player is a free agent. The Raptors gave those 2 Exhibit 10 deals to Mohamedou Gueye and Kevin Obanor. These guys, they're just not good enough to make the roster regardless, but they will be involved with the Raptors 905. They just will not be on those standard NBA deals with the Raptors. Kind of like, what was his name last year? The Michigan State player, something Brown? Gabe Brown. That's the same deal that he was on last season. But next up here is Javon Freeman-Liberty. This is a bit of a difficult one as well because I think he's relatively safe. He's on a 2-way deal. We have 3 2-way contracts right now where, we already have our 3 2-way guys. I wouldn't call them necessarily locks here because if they underperform, the Raptors could elect to get rid of them and sign a different player on a 2-way contract. I don't see that really being an issue for Javon Freeman-Liberty. I think that they were very impressed with what they saw from the G League last season. They were very impressed with what they saw in preseason. He was amazing in the summer league, rather, not preseason. So I think he's good, but I don't think he's completely safe. Next up, OG Anunoby. Yeah, a straight-up stone-cold lock here. We know all about OG Anunoby. He has nothing to fear. He is absolutely fine. Otto Porter Jr. is an interesting one. He's making $6 million. I know the Raptors were going to waive him if Fred VanVleet stayed. They probably won't waive him. I could maybe put him in extremely safe, but I think he knows that if things aren't going well this season, the Raptors won't really have a problem in getting rid of that contract. I don't really see that happening, but I think Otto Porter Jr. knows he's got to show up if he wants to continue to play basketball this season. Next up, Dennis Schroeder. I don't know. The way he played the FIBA World Cup, he's a stone cold lock. Raptors just got him on a mid-level exception for 2 years. I don't see him going anywhere. Absolutely anywhere. Siakam is quite pretty much a lock. As much of a stone cold lock as you possibly can be. 2-time All-Star, 2-time All-NBA. Up next is Gary Trent Jr. This is another one, stone cold lock. There's just no reason for the Raptors to waive Gary Trent no matter how bad things get this season. He is making it throughout the summer. And we're talking just about training camp in general. Gary Trent can kick his feet up and know he's making the roster. Thaddeus Young is weird because the Raptors had the option to not pick up his guarantee for the season. He was guaranteed $1 million on June 30th. He was guaranteed $1 million for the season. And on June 30th, that guarantee became $8 million. The Raptors elected to not waive him on June 30th and only pay $1 million because the cap space they would have generated from Thad leaving does not equate to $8 million in cap space. That $8 million can be used in a trade this season as salary fillers. So for that reason, even though in an ideal world he's here and we have somebody else on the roster, he's extremely safe because they are literally they are paying him $7 million extra than they could have been doing. They are not just going to waive that out of nowhere. They are going to use this hopefully as salary filler this season. If they don't, I'll be pretty pissed off. But they are going to trade this guy this season. So he is safe because they want that salary filler. Up next, Marquise Noel. I'll give him another one where he's kind of, he's a two-way guy. He's on one of those two-way contracts. We have 3 two-way guys, like I said. There's no real reason for him to be at all overly concerned, but he knows he's got to play. He knows he's got to go out there and play good basketball, or potentially they could replace him. Same with Javon Freeman-Liberty. Up next, Grady Dick. What could happen for him? A recent 13th overall pick to not make the roster going into the season. And the same can be said in greater capacity for Scotty Barnes. That man is going absolutely nowhere. Chris Boucher, there's definitely people that are going to be lower on this list than he is. So I'm going to say it's extremely safe. He's not a stone cold lock, but there's no real reason for him to fear anything going down. He's not, kicking his feet up. He's got to grind a little bit, but he's extremely safe as far as what his roster position and where he stands with his team is going to be. Jeff Dowtin is where we run into some big complications. Some very, very big complications, by the way. Like I said earlier, there are 15 guaranteed contracts on the Raptors. They're only allowed 15 guys in the roster other than the 3 two-way players. Of the 15 guaranteed contracts, it does not include Jeff Dowtin. Jeff Dowtin is on a non-guaranteed deal. Now, his guarantee, if he makes the final roster, he gets a nice guarantee. That is, for him, what he's earned so far, it's life-changing money. But he has to dethrone a player that is on guaranteed money. In a perfect world for me, where there's only 14 guaranteed contracts, he beats them out, and he's on the roster for me. But unfortunately, I can't see the Raptors waiving any of these other players to make room for him. And for that reason, I think he's getting waived. I don't want it that way. I think he's our second best point guard, and we need point guards. But this is the situation that's cultivated as a result of this guy, Malachi Flynn, on the edge. The Raptors, about 1 year ago now, picked up the option on his 4th year, the 4th-year option for the player. Why? Beats me, what has he done in the first 3 years of his, at that point, 2 years ago to warrant picking up his 4th-year option? Doesn't make any sense, and he is inferior to Jeff Dowtin. Jeff Dowtin outplayed him all throughout last season. Jeff Dowtin got meaningful minutes. At the end of last season, when Malachi Flynn didn't, Jeff Dowtin's a better player, but because Malachi Flynn is on a guaranteed deal, the front office will not want to look bad by taking Malachi Flynn's player option after 3 years. It was 3 years in the NBA. They picked up his option for a 4th year. Or it was 2 years because it was going into his 3rd season. He's done nothing to warrant an NBA job for the Raptors at this point. I'm sick of praying and hoping every year that he rises up and turns into a serviceable NBA player. But because he's on a guaranteed deal and they don't want to look bad for picking up the option, he's likely here to stay for 1 more year before his contract runs out and he becomes an RFA. And I hope that is that, unless he can significantly turn himself around this season. Next up here is Ron Harper Jr. And I know I have two two-way guys here, but here's one I'm going to say is on the edge. I know they signed him to a two-way deal to start this season, to start the offseason, but he was underwhelming in Summer League, and he was underwhelming in the G League last year. I think if a good player becomes available for a two-way spot, I don't think they have a problem passing on Ron Harper Jr., saying thanks but no thanks, and bringing in somebody they have a little bit more confidence in. He's on the edge in the sense that he knows he's got to play up to keep this status, but he might be a little bit more in the middle of these two tiers, but I think he's more on the edge than he is in the check and shoulder tier. Christian Koloko, they got to have a good degree of confidence in the guy they drafted. They must have a good belief in his potential. There's just nobody else really here that they would cut. There's a lot of guys they would cut before he does. He's not a stone cold lock, but he is extremely safe. Extremely safe. Jalen McDaniels. Right. Jalen McDaniels, yes. On the biannual exception, $4.5 million a year. Pretty good value for a player of his caliber. I'm not going to put him up with the stone cold locks, but he's extremely safe. Another one where, nothing, like, he's fine. He's not kicking up his feet, but he's also not really worrying about it. He's going to make the roster. Jakob Poeltl is a stone cold lock. There is no reason for Jakob Poeltl to be, he can kick his feet up. There's no reason to worry in any way whatsoever on his future. Precious Achiuwa, kind of in that Boucher tier where, they're not going to cut him over other guys, but he's also not a stone cold lock for the way he played last season. We want him to pick his shit up. Which brings us to Garrett Temple. I'm a little bit upset Garrett Temple got a guaranteed contract because he's one that I would not have guaranteed over Jeff Dowtin. They gave him a guarantee like a month ago. I'd be pretty surprised if they gave this guy a guarantee and then just cut him. They're basically paying him $3 million to be a locker room presence as a veteran. A locker room veteran presence. They paid him $3 million to do so. More than what Christian Wood is making this season. So those are the three guys I believe will get waived. Waived in the sense for the Exhibit 10 guys will be in the G League. Waived for Jeff Dowtin. He will actually be waived, in my opinion. I don't want it that way. But Cam Payne is an option for this team. If there's not a very attractive market out there, as teams have already used up a lot of their cap space, can the Raptors make a move for Cam Payne? I explained in a video on the main channel today that, well, he seems to have a vendetta against the Raptors for cutting him in 2019 when he was on the Raptors previously. He seems to want to go to a contender, but if a spot can open up, Masai can get him on a minimum deal, and we're still under luxury tax if he does, I think you have no option but to cut Malachi Flynn. You're signing a point guard. You brought in Garrett Temple, veteran presence, whatever. There's no reason to have him on the roster anymore if you're going to bring in Cam Payne. I'll happily pay him to significantly improve in the position with Cam Payne instead of him. But I find that very unlikely, so we will sit at this being how I perceive the roster decisions to ultimately go down. But your thoughts, let me know in the chat. Let me know in the comments.